Hey guys, today I'm gonna show you how I remade Yes and by Ariana Grande just like this. Now let's start out with the piano because it's so essential to this track, and this is what the piano sounds like alone. The piano is playing these chords. It's an E minor 7, and then it goes to an A flat 7 chord. And as you can see, there are 4 different layers, but let's start out with the main layer because that's what I started with when I tried to remake this song. And without any plugins on the individual track or on the house piano bus, the main sound sounds like this. And that preset is called Piano Mod Forte, and it's from Splice's Serum presets. I just play with the decay here to get it to sound this snappy, because listen what happens if I turn the decay up. It just loses all that snappiness. Obviously that has to do with the MIDI as well. I made these MIDI notes really short, especially the first 2, and for the 3rd and the 4th I made them a little bit longer to get that da, 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 da. You can also see that these MIDI notes are not on the grid. They are nudged a little bit to the right to get more of that swung feel that you often hear in house music. And I really just use my ear here to just put the MIDI notes a little bit to the right. Then I just listened to the original, and then I went back and forth until I felt like I got the right amount of swing. Now let's get some plugins on the sound. I did some OTT, some decapitator for some saturation, and in the effect rack I did some more decapitator and some filter. I just filtered off the really high end. And then I did some micro shift to get some width. And some Saturn for some saturation again. And an enveloper from Logic to just shorten the sound a little bit more. Listen without it. With it. And that enveloper really just makes it very tight and very snappy. Da, 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 da. And then I added Crush, which is a plugin I love for filtering. And then I added some RC20 at the end. That just makes the piano a little bit warmer, and I mean it gives the piano more vibe, I think. And for reverb effects I added this small room in Valhalla Supermassive. In addition to that I'm adding some Valhalla Vintage Reverb, again a very small room. I don't want to hear that reverb tail, I just want it to be placed in a short room. Now without the effects. And with this, I layered a deeper layer, which is just really the octave down in the piano. I also did an octave up. And that's with this pitch wheel. I just pitch it up an octave and I really crushed the sound with this shape shifter. Again, I did another deep layer. And you can hear this deep layer is even lower, so 1 octave above the other deep layer. And together these 3 layers kind of fill out the main piano sound to make it sound bigger and more like the piano from the original track. Now without the layers, it's cool, but it sounds more thin and less impressive, right? And in addition to this, I also did some processing on the house piano bus. I did some OTT again, some shape shifter, did a couple of effect racks, did some filtering, and some crystallizer. It's basically turned off. I basically didn't use this one. some Devil Lock for distortion, and then I did some EQ. I boosted a little bit of top while rolling off about 20k. I mean, you can't really hear that stuff anyway. As you can see, this is me basically just trying out a bunch of different stuff, and I've actually ended up not using all this stuff, as you can see. But I did use some reverb on all the layers. Now I did some more supermassive again, just a tiny bit. And with this RC20, I did a little bit of a flutter effect, which I heard in the original. Now again, listen to all these layers with the effects and just the main layer with no effects. Now let's move on to the drums, and I'm going to show you what happens in the drums when the whole beat comes in. So first, start out with our kick. Now, as you can see, there are 4 layers. I wouldn't necessarily use this many kick layers if I did an original song. It's just in this remake I'm chasing a sound, and oftentimes I don't find the perfect sound in Splice, for example, so I have to layer to get closer. But let's listen to the main kick. On this main kick, I just rolled off the sub frequencies and I added some low mids and took away some of that 2K because I thought it was a little bit too bright and annoying. I also rolled off at around 10K. And I added in a sub because I cut the sub in the main kick. And this layer is just the sub frequencies under that main kick. Listen to that sub alone. And in addition to that, we got a kick layer. And then we have the last kick layer, which is a sample I got from Splice. It's replicating a 909 drum machine. And it's got sort of like that vintage sound. And all these 4 together. And you can see this drum machine kick is playing an extra hit some places, and that's because it's playing with the snare, which also does this. But so let's look at the snares now. The main snare is also a sound, not from a drum machine I have, but from Splice, a 909 snare, which has that like white noisy texture and it's pretty bright. So I just layered this deeper snare to give that main snare some oomph. In addition to that, we have this snare layer. Again, it sounds pretty similar to the other sounds, but I just thought I needed some more beef. And then we have the claps, which is playing alone in the intro. Now with the kicks and the snares and the claps. And just pay attention to these small snare hits I talked about. Just like the piano hits, they are not on the grid, they're actually moved a little bit to the right to get that swung feel. Just listen to how well this goes with the house piano. Now next, let's look at some hats. We got a lot of open hats in this song. And I've just grouped them together here in a bus called open hats. And together they sound like this. This loop layer is actually cut out from a Splice loop I found. And this one has the extra hits. And I'm just layering a one-shot sample on top of that. And this open hat is giving more of that sizzle, while the other is giving more of that real hi-hat sound with these extra hits and more attack. And in addition to that, we got these more closed hi-hats playing on the quarter notes. And together with the open hats, they kind of dance around each other and does a lot for the groove. Now, in addition to this, we have a crash. And this is a main crash. And a more sizzly layer to get more of that sound. In addition to this, I added a shaker. And I added another loop from Splice. Then I just pan it in the left ear. And you don't really hear it, but it just gives the groove some more life. And if I take it away, you're gonna miss something. With the shaker as well. Now let's listen to the drums as a whole. And with the piano. And something I forgot to mention when I showed you the piano is I added in some synth chords as a layer to the piano. Just gives the piano more warmth and more depth. Listen. Without. Thinner. Now with. Yeah, that's nice. Now let's move on to the bass, which sounds like this alone. Sitting and moving some of these MIDI notes off to the right was really crucial to get this bass to groove. Just listen with the kicks. Some of the bass notes are a little bit late and that gives it that swung feel. Boom, 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 boom. Now, this bass consists of a main bass, which sounds like this. Which is basically the whole bass sound, right? It's just a Splice preset again called Bass 02 Vogue. I just played a little bit with the unison. I think originally it had more unison. But I just made it a little bit more mono. I also used the Ozone Imager 2 to do that. I just found without it, it was a little bit too wide in my headset. In the original, I felt like the bass was a little bit more in the center. And I also cut out the lows in this bass, the sub frequencies, and I layered a sub layer instead, which just has the low frequencies. Now, if you're not listening on headphones or monitors, you probably won't hear that. And the idea here is to add some saturation to the main bass to really make that main bass cut through on different speakers. Then I'm just adding in that sub layer to fill out that low end. And I'm also sidechaining this bass bus to the kicks. I'm just choosing the main kick here and sidechaining a little bit just to make sure that kick transient comes through before the bass hits. Now, before we got to the vocal chops, which I remade with a very inexpensive mic, just because I couldn't really use the original acapella track because of copyright, I'm just going to show you how I did the ending part of this intro, where the chords change a little bit and a little pluck sound comes in. In this ending, the bass is going to a G flat and to an F note with this little fill in the end. Right there, the piano is dropping out and we get this little plucky sound, which comes in instead. And this pluck sound consists of a lead pluck. Sounds more like a synth pluck and a bell. And this sound is really the the main part of the sound. This is a Serum preset from Make Pop Music and their Poptopia pack, and it's called Chiming In. I'm just taking away some of that really high stuff and adding some reverb in here. And I'm layering with this last layer. Now these layers just have slightly different textures, and together they make a more interesting pluck sound in my opinion. And in addition to the bass changing and these plucks coming in, there is a synth pad happening, or a synth chord really. And these synth chords are kind of playing a G flat major chord, but with the 9th and the 6th, and it goes to a F minor 7 chord at the end there. And this synth is also made up of different sounds. The main one is this Last Train Home sound from, again, Poptopia, Make Pop Music, shout out. And then we have a little bit more of a retro sound blended in. And this is the Juno 6 from Arturia. And it's got a little bit of chorus on it, and just gives the Serum sound a little bit more warmth. Just the Serum sound. But with the Juno, it just sounds a little bit nicer. Now let's throw in the plucks. And the bass. And let's listen with everything. So for this vocal chop, I just recorded my own voice with this cheap Rode mic, and it sounded like this originally.
I just don't.
And that's just the first phrase, I just don't. I thought it sounded something like that in the original. And I just took that, and then I sung the I keep. Then I just chopped that I keep up, so I used the same I keep multiple times after each other. Then I went into autotune, and I just played with deformant.
I just don't.
I made it deeper with this formant in autotune and really tuned this vocal hard. And then I went into Melodyne, where I actually formatted it up again. Just gave it this weird sound that I liked. And then I just bounced all those sections into one track where I just tuned the vocal a little bit more. And then the fun part starts. Because without any of the plugins I added later, it just sounds like this. It's a little bit low. It doesn't really sound like the chop from the original, but I added a bunch of normal vocal plugins, but I also did something special with this little altar boy. I just pitched the whole thing up an octave and played a little bit with the formants. So just let's listen to just that. And now we're starting to sound a little bit closer to the original. Also did some compression EQ. And a little bit of saturation and just some distortion in the RC20 to give it some vibe. Also did a little bit of that short room I showed you earlier in the Supermassive. And some more playing with a formant now in the pitch wheel plugin. And some filtering in the crush. And some effects, again, short reverb here. And I just added, again, even more. I just did a bus and I added an even higher layer with Alter Boy, an octave above that. and I did some echo. Tape echo and some eighth note delay. But we're not finished. I also added a bunch of plugins on the bus here. Just distorts it a lot more, and it compresses it a little bit more, and it just makes it a little bit more choppy. It adds some chorus, some micro shift, and a little bit of little radiator for some more warmth, with a little bit more echo and a little bit more reverb. In addition to this, I added this high pitch layer, which is basically just the same thing, the same track, just pitched up 12 semitones, which is a octave. Sounds like this. And together with the other one. And I just did the same process from this.
When you leave, yeah, I know. When you leave out the door.
Which ended up sounding like this. So let's listen to that intro one time again with this. That's basically my remake. Now, if you want to watch more of these kind of videos where I remake famous songs, then check out my remake of Greedy and Water, where I show you the same kind of process on different songs, because looking at this process and more importantly trying to do that yourself will really teach you a lot about how songs are put together and what kind of elements go into a professional production.